Hi, everybody. Welcome. We're just going to give folks a minute or two to pile in, and then we'll get started. All right, we'll give everybody about one more minute, and then we'll get started. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Appreciate your taking some time to join us today. I'm Jess Block. I am the head of growth and transformation at Factor. And in this capacity, I have had the privilege to work very closely with my colleague, Hitesh Talwar, who I will let introduce himself. But as we mentioned on the last Sense Collective webinar, for those of you who are able to join us there, we wanted to spend some time just sharing a little bit of our journey over the past couple of years in terms of becoming users, becoming builders, integrating generative AI into our Factor services, where we are supporting clients doing complex legal work at scale. And we wanted to both give you a preview of some of the exciting work that we have been doing, as well as just kind of talk about the process. We're happy to keep this relatively informal when we get to the end and open up for questions. And Hitesh is here and has a wealth of experience that he's been sharing with some of our participants in the Sense Collective, and certainly some of our Factor clients and team members, but want to give you the opportunity to ask him some questions as well. So excited to begin the discussion. Why don't we, let me just remind everybody really quickly, in case you are new to this conversation, who Factor is. So we are very focused at Factor on providing contracting services for our clients. And this tends to take many different forms. Again, some of you are joining us as this is one in a series with our Sense Collective webinar. So some of you know that we are building communities out in the world, supporting legal departments in a variety of different ways in and around using generative AI. But by and large, we are doing contracting work alongside our clients across a wide spectrum of different industries, different contract types. And although we are very often providing scaled managed service teams where a group of our lawyers are supporting the in-house legal work and business users, whether it's procurement, financial services, market documentation, sell-side contracting, we are actually drafting, negotiating, executing, helping to manage those large-scale contracting workflows. We're also bringing some of our insights and best practices to bear to help our clients make their contracting processes work better. So providing advisory services, providing insights into what technologies and techniques are really making a difference for us towards creating that better ecosystem. And in this moment where everybody is trying to do a lot of new stuff, we're spending a lot of time helping to add additional capacity. And whether that's thinking and insight about how to come up with KPIs or measure ROI around a new technology initiative, we are helping to jumpstart change against a wide variety of initiatives, generative AI or otherwise. And in the middle of this are the tools, technologies, and process changes that we have been employing ourselves, especially over the last 18 months or so. So I want to take a minute and introduce you all to Hitesh. And Hitesh has spoken with us before on several webinars, but this is special insofar as I think you're going to get to hear a lot about Hitesh's passion project and the incredible work that he has been able to do, amplified by what the capability of GenAI has made possible. So Hitesh, will you give us a little bit about your background and kind of our journey over the past 18 months or so?
Sure. Thanks, Jess. Hey, everybody. So I started out in the discovery space straight out of law school at Thomson Reuters. Grew through the ranks there, lots of technology side quests while I was there. That group was acquired by EY about 5 years ago. I moved over. At the time, I had an opportunity to sit on the global law innovation technology team there. And then about 3.5, 4 years ago, there was an opportunity to come to Factor, help out on the product side, eventually lead the client technology team, and cut to today. I lead our applied AI and R&D function, which is an esoteric mix of legal technologists with very diverse backgrounds, ranging from economics to astrophysics, with a healthy sprinkling, of course, of the standard legal tech, legal services arc. But yeah, Jess, in terms of our journey, I think it all starts as is the case with a lot of people when GPT-4 was first rolled out in early 23. And I think we were able to dive in straight and use the API. And I think we had a couple of really quick intuitions. I think the first one was that chatbots are a great entry point, but they aren't necessarily the UI UX for AI. And I think that what that led us to sort of conclude immediately was that for AI to be useful, it needed to be sort of grounded in business context. It needed to be where users are. It needed to be within the communication layer. And realistically, what people want out of these solutions are insights and answers, which often take the form of reports, not necessarily back and forth with a chatbot. So of course, chatbots are useful in many ways, but for us, very clearly, very early on, it was about surfacing this capability across the life cycle of what we do in the middle of these complex negotiations for our clients. And I think the second intuition was that for the first time, it felt like it was possible to build things that weren't possible to build before. And second, it also felt like you wouldn't have had to sort of spend all of the time that you do with that you had to with traditional legacy ML, where you spend time training these models, you spend time gathering the data, etc. So those sort of early intuitions led us to sort of formally invest in R&D very early on. And I think a big sort of difference maker was getting fairly early access to ChatGPT Enterprise. I think that allowed us to sort of explore the capability in a more holistic manner because, along with enterprise access to ChatGPT, we also got enterprise access to the API. And so, being able to sort of review the features that OpenAI has released, being able to sort of stay on top of what these models are capable of with new model shipping every few weeks, every few months. It feels like with all the new techniques that are surfaced, all the new API features, I think we've been on this journey of trying to figure out through a lot of experimentation, prototyping, how to turn these into reliable, explainable things that can deliver the sorts of outcomes that we want to deliver for our clients and for our people.
And in our process of kind of looking at the market and keeping up with, where generative AI was starting to surface in existing products or become sort of part of the feature set of different platforms, like how did that buy versus build calculus unfold for us? Because I know that this is a moment that a lot of legal departments are facing with respect to where do I invest? Where do I put money in my budget? What are the areas where I really want to spend energy? How did we think about that over the course of recent months?
Yeah, so there's obviously a lot of innovation in the market, and we pay very careful attention to it. But for us, really, it's about sort of fitting this capability into our existing workflows. and the environments in which we operate with our clients. We're very deeply integrated into their systems, into their infrastructure. And so while we've made previously investments in a lot of tools, third-party market sort of facing tools in the past, there are always challenges around, well, our customers, our clients might have their own investments that they've made, navigating all of the security and governance challenges, and all of this within the context of, well, with this transformative capability, you want it to sort of fit into the existing workflows. You don't necessarily want to have to build up or sort of, go through the friction of adopting and change managing another technology deployment necessarily. Thanks to the way generative AI has sort of progressed as a paradigm, we've been able to sort of build very bespoke, tailored solutions that we can sort of plug in at various points within our sort of services portfolio. And I think, that over the last sort of 18 months, that has progressively become more true with each passing month. And that's why we find ourselves where we are.
Let's take a look at this. So I see kind of a wide variety of folks have joined as attendees, and some of you have had the opportunity to hear about this from us. Some of you have helped to create some of these solutions. But if you want to go to the next slide, Ashley. What we have built at Factor and what we're going to talk a little bit about today, and what we've had the privilege of sharing with a lot of our current clients or current members of the Sense community, is what we are calling Integral, which is a portfolio in essence of Factor built contracting accelerators. So as Hitesh mentioned, we have partnered in the past and continue to partner with industry leading CLM platforms or other kinds of point solutions. And while the power of these systems is remarkable, sometimes it's been difficult for us as a service provider first to bring that to our clients, to require them to make a switch into a new platform. And the way that generative AI has been able to sort of meet our users where they are has really been transformative in our ability to bring technology to the work that we are taking on from our clients. I think, we are incredibly well positioned as a group of 400 plus legal professionals to provide really specific and actionable insights to Hitesh and team that has led to the creation of really fit for purpose solves for a variety of pain points along the spectrum of contract drafting. So you can see there's from intake to drafting to negotiation to actually executing a contract and then dealing with the information and the insights that result about negotiated positions or the resultant supplier language that exists across a body of contracts. There have been a lot of different things that we have been able to really introduce generative AI into behind the scenes to a certain extent, because this is part of our service delivery. But increasingly, we are able to share those with our clients and with those of you in our community who are interested in the way that we're bringing this to bear, which is what we'd like to spend some more time on today. And we're actually going to double click on Integral Mosaic and Integral Negotiator, which are two of the point solutions that we have been using at very significant scale within the work that Factor does across our contracting clients. So Hitesh, is there anything that you want to touch on about sort of, how we have been able to draw on the work that our teams are doing every day in the development of these accelerators?
Absolutely. So I think from a mindset perspective, we've sort of approached this a little bit differently from how you might approach building traditional SaaS or traditional software, in that we see AI as a capability. And what that means is that we're able to sort of look at the work we do as a series of tasks and deploy this capability against those tasks where it makes sense, while sort of ensuring that we always have the oversight and explainability that allows humans to make reasoned, well-informed judgments based on what the AI is saying. And so what that is required is for us to sort of do a lot of deep research. And by that, I mean reading very technical papers, figuring out what to implement, actually implementing it, failing to get the results that we were hoping to get first time around, and then trying and trying and trying again until we find something that fits into our pipeline and makes sense and works, and delivers the sorts of accuracy, precision, recall that we want to deliver. Um, you know, it really is a process of constant iteration and constant experimentation, that sort of leads us to where we are. It is not something you can just sort of naively prompt your way to doing. And so I think that's been a big difference maker. And as we talk about Mosaic and Negotiator, I look forward to sharing a little bit more from an architectural perspective.
Okay, so we're going to watch a movie on Negotiator, which seeks to give you a little bit more perspective on the power of this specific application of GenAI. And then we will double click and get into exactly what we mean by reasoning. And we'll actually spend some time talking through how we've orchestrated all of the elements together to deliver these really phenomenal outcomes for our clients. All right, hit it.
Integrating GenAI, legal expertise and practitioner perspective. Factor's integral suite of accelerators leverages agentic orchestration to unlock the power of frontier large language models, LLMs, offering practical, high-impact and highly targeted applications of GenAI across the contracting ecosystem. Meet Mosaic, the intelligent contract extraction, interpretation and reasoning tool in the Integral suite. Mosaic goes beyond simple data extraction, using advanced reasoning to understand and analyze your contracts and documents. Interrogate contracts for immediate, contextualized insights, delivering strategic and reliable analysis in real time. Enable rapid assessment of risk and exposure, contract management and renewal optimization, M&A acceleration, and contract harmonization, strategic insights and decision-making, and regulatory response and compliance optimization. Customize your output format with unparalleled flexibility. Analyze entire documents to answer complex questions, piecing together information from multiple sections. Mosaic comprehends context, connects related information, and delivers in-depth analysis across whole documents or sets of contracts. Setting a new standard, Mosaic performs with 90 to 97% accuracy, leaving traditional tools far behind. Scalability is at Mosaic's core. What once took months now takes hours. More than speed, Mosaic eliminates the frustration and complexity that even last-generation AI tools couldn't solve. No more fragmented insights, missed connections, and countless hours of verification. Mosaic offers a fast, insightful, and genuinely practical solution, offering cost savings of 90% compared to conventional law firm contract review methods, and 50% compared to legacy tech-enabled review. Transform your contracts from potential liabilities into strategic assets. Gain insights that were once prohibitively expensive, identifying risks, optimizing terms, and ensuring compliance across your entire contract portfolio. Accelerate and enhance your contracting function with Integral Mosaic.
Excellent. Okay, so we've built this phenomenal reasoning engine, and everybody's like, oh, great, can I see it? And I'm like, I mean, you can see it, but you really need to understand why it's different first, because otherwise you won't really appreciate what you're seeing. And so one of the things, like the path that I've been going through in terms of trying to bring this amazing innovation to market to our clients, is really just explaining how reasoning is so different from retrieval, and the way that a lot of these tools, the last generation of these tools, the processes we used to use work. So I'm gonna set the stage in how I've been trying to explain it, and then I'm gonna let Hitesh double click on it, both, to improve upon what I said and to give us more of a technical orientation. But if anybody is familiar with Daniel Kahneman's work, in his book, Thinking Fast and Slow, he talks about system one thinking and system two thinking, so fast thinking and slow thinking. And with fast thinking, there's more of this like quick, automatic, subconscious retrieval of information. And it's good for repetitive tasks. It's good for really like simple patterns. And it is in some ways kind of how we're used to thinking about computers and technology working. But system two thinking, so the slow thinking, is slower, obviously, more deliberate, more conscious, and it's what you use to do more complex reasoning, analytical tasks. And the difference between these two things is really at the crux of how I think we are changing all of our own minds in terms of what to expect from the technology. So if you think about how we used to do this, and go ahead and build this out, Ashley, if you don't mind. Um, we used to have to spend a lot of time training systems, relying on patterns, relying on keyword matching, relying on regular expressions. The outputs we got were not super high quality, but then once you got to an output, what you're doing is actually using that slow thinking, that system two thinking to say, okay, I've pulled out the liability clause and I've pulled out a termination clause. And I've used what I know about my domain knowledge to read this and come up with an answer to the ultimate question that I wanted to understand. But with Mosaic, we've actually tasked that slow thinking to the generative AI, which gets us so much faster to high quality reasoned outputs. So if you want to go ahead and let's take a look at the next one. And Hitesh, do you want to double click on this? I know this is a bit of an eye chart for everybody, but I think it's really important just to understand how much labor is eliminated from the process to ground us and why this is so cool.
Sure. I think at the core, what we're trying to do with each of these accelerators is figure out how we can reduce cognitive load while still providing the right human oversight, the right auditability, the right sort of QC. But frankly, when you think about something like contract interrogation or interpretation, what you really want is the answer. And you want to understand how you got to the answer. What you do not necessarily want is a bunch of extracted clauses that you then have to yourself reason over to get to the answer. Because, typically, and just you alluded to this, with legacy ML systems, you would spend a lot of time getting the right examples, training these systems, only to see maybe 60, 70% performance. By sort of building something like Mosaic, what we've been able to do is get that to the 90s, the accuracy, the actual performance. But also, it isn't an apples to apples comparison because Mosaic isn't designed for extraction. It can do that at the same sort of level of competency, at the same high sort of 90s accuracy, but it is designed to get you to the answer with a high degree of reliability and explainability. So if on screen you can see what the old way of doing things might be, and you can see how there are 3 or 4 different tasks that you actually have to perform in order to get to the answer. With Mosaic, the task that you have to perform is QCing the output by sort of looking at the reasoning trace that's generated by the model. Instead of extracting the clause after spending a lot of time training on examples to get that clause, and then sort of pulling in all of the relevant clauses, and then having a lawyer actually reason over the extracted clauses to determine what the actual answer is, Mosaic will take you straight to the answer. And the work that our teams now have to do is ensure that Mosaic's reasoning was correct, and so that they can make sure that the outcomes that we're providing are justified or explainable. So it's an absolute change in terms of both our workflow, but also the sorts of outcomes we can provide. If you can, without needing to train a system, which is typically days, weeks of work, get straight to the answer within hours for, again, hundreds, thousands of documents, that changes everything. And that's what we've been seeing in production.
So Hitesh, I think a lot of people that I've talked to, I'm sure some of our participants today, and certainly us in the early days of experimenting with this core capability, didn't have a great experience. So, like at a glance, the output looks like the answer, but then once you start reading it, it's dull, it's off, it's making stuff up. And we actually were seeing this sort of like blah, bad to vanilla performance in a lot of um, the early and even more recent introductions of Gen AI into existing technology platforms. So I think it is helpful for you to spend a few minutes talking about what we mean by orchestration and what we mean by agentic, because the way that you have been able to orchestrate and integrate different technologies and different techniques has really been the difference between usable output, reliable output, output that actually eliminates labor versus output that just is like, I have to do as much work going back to reread the contract to make sure that it's not lying to me kind of stuff, which is, I think, a lot of the background buzz that I have heard from some individuals that have had uneven experience with uneven technologies. Ashley, if you go to the next slide.
Sure. And absolutely. I think agentic is a loaded term. I think, it is all the rage nowadays, and there isn't a settled definition. To us, agentic, an agentic solution or system is one where these models are able to actually exercise agency, their own agency, that, you aren't just simply sort of chaining a bunch of prompts together to get to the answer that you want to get to. And we realize that in a number of different ways, and that has a bunch of downstream effects that I'll get to. So across our pipeline, you can see that there's a planning stage when a user puts in a query. That is us essentially defining a structure for the models to express a plan around how they might answer the question. Um, and then what we are able to do in our pipeline is actually traverse that plan and agentically retrieve context, aggregating it, re-ranking it, assessing it for relevance, and then finally pushing it into a reasoning agent that is able to sort of equipped only with what is directly relevant to the answer, produce an output that is highly accurate. And then because we're also able to surface the reasoning trace, we're also able to surface confidence scores, we are able to provide signal to our teams who QC these outputs to be able to very quickly determine whether the answer is correct or not. And most of the time it is. There's another elephant in the room that isn't talked about enough, and that's hallucination. I think the way to minimize hallucinations, and that's something that we've taken very seriously, and we see essentially negligible rates of hallucination, within our Mosaic use cases. What we've been able to do is essentially figure out how to steer these things in a way that sort of prevents the sort of aberrant behavior you might see that leads to hallucination by ensuring that they're agentically sort of consolidating and gathering up relevant context in order to actually provide the right answer, that they're being fed by different sort of smaller agents that are retrieving context from disparate parts of a document. We have effectively minimized hallucinations considerably. Now, we have a number of other things in the pipeline as well, such as consistency checks and sort of ensuring that, when you sort of surface a confidence score, it is an actual representation of what the model's confidence is, as opposed to simply asking it, which seems to be a technique that's employed very, very often. We don't see a lot of those pitfalls that you typically see with sort of more naive prompt-driven approaches. And a lot of that has to do with our orchestration again. So, when we get a document into Mosaic, it's broken into a lot of smaller chunks. And each of those chunks are sort of defined in a way that, again, we've optimized very deeply to be contextually rich, to be relevant. And then we use a combination of search techniques to actually retrieve those chunks for these models to reason over and answer questions. So we use dense representations as well as sparse representations. Dense representations are, again, they seek to capture conceptual or semantic meaning. Sparse representations are more term frequency or keyword based. And realistically, if you think about information retrieval, you kind of need a combination of those two. But then, even there, after that, what we've been able to do with re-ranking and relevance assessments is, I think, been the real unlock for us, because you can retrieve a number of chunks and give them to a model to provide an answer. and you will see the standard 5-10% hallucination rate. But if you are able to only feed what is truly relevant to the user's question to the model at each stage of this agentic pipeline, you are able to minimize hallucinations to a point where they're effectively negligible. And that's what we have seen in production use.
Okay.
You combine that with the confidence scores and the reasoning trace, and we've been able to equip our users to essentially be able to audit these outputs in a way where even if there is something that is off about the answer, it never slips through the cracks.
So let's watch another video that is a different user experience of some of these same techniques, and we're calling it Negotiator. So a couple of important things to note about Negotiator. As Hitesh walked through, we are working in the background to provide the same sort of depth of reasoning trace, structured output, context-aware answers that the user can rely on. However, the user is making the final determination. We're meeting the user where they are, so sort of injecting into that communication layer as a Microsoft Word add-in, which you'll see in a moment. And we are taking input and direction, as we often do from our clients, about their negotiation position, their playbook structure, their fallbacks, their must-haves, their red flags, all in natural language. So as you would express these instructions to a person, this is how we are injecting it into the negotiator experience. And then we'll stop and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But you can see some of the work that Hitesh has outlined here in terms of our proprietary orchestration manifesting to the user in this video.
Meet Negotiator, a powerful addition to the Integral suite. It analyzes and compares counterparty contracts to in-house guidelines or playbooks and recommends red lines. Negotiator brings plug-and-play intelligence to life. It starts by instantly absorbing and understanding your playbook or negotiating guidelines in whatever structured or unstructured format they may be in today. Next, it compares any incoming counterparty agreement or markup to your guidelines, flagging discrepancies as well as omissions. For each flagged provision, Negotiator recommends revisions using the absorbed guidance. Because accuracy and confidence are everything, Negotiator supports instant source citations, allowing you to validate AI interpretations against the original verbatim playbook content via smart hover display. Simply move your cursor over any AI-generated text to instantly reveal and compare with the source material. Color-coded confidence ratings ensure instantly verifiable, high-quality results at a glance. Inbuilt intelligent data extraction ensures critical contract elements adhere to guidelines. Upload checklists or input custom queries to streamline quality control. Get instant answers with confidence scores, direct links to relevant sections, and downloadable results, all customizable in real time. Finally, all of this happens within Microsoft Word, where you already live and work. Accelerate and enhance your contracting function with Integral Negotiator.
All right, apologies to anyone who's offended by the suggestion that you live in Microsoft Word. But for the working day, that is what we have found. I think one of the important distinctions, Hitesh, in terms of how we Factor have approached this is as consumers of legal technology, as a group of people that are relying on these things day to day to get work done, I do think we have a lot of empathy for those of you out in the world that are making decisions about buying technology. And for those of you who are grappling with all of the different new features, functionalities, tools, point solutions that are being sold to you. So, rest assured, this is actually not something that we're offering up as a technology that we want to throw in the hopper with all those other things. These are really features of how we get our work done. And one of the things that has been so important to us in our journey is really internalizing how hard it is to keep pace with everything that changes, really internalizing how hard it is to get people to reframe their mindset about how to lean on these technologies, how to learn to trust, how to understand specifically how to coach and change a workflow to take advantage without introducing undue risk. There's a lot that goes into just being good users. And there's a lot that goes into leading a team of people who you want to be good users. And all of that is work in the same way that executing contracts is work. And we seek to support our clients through the Sense Collective and our training initiatives and other things as they bravely take on that work. But in instances where our clients just want us to come in and help them with the problem, we are taking up the mantle of being good users of this technology. So that is how we are thinking of this, less as a technology that Factor is offering up to the market, and more of one of the many ways that this really revolutionizes the service that we're offering to do the work that our clients need done, whether that is responding to a crisis event, understanding what's in their contracts post a merger or acquisition, or in advance of a transaction event. These have been some of the ways that we've been able to leverage these technologies in real world circumstances at very large scale to answer some of the questions like we shared in the Mosaic example. I'm going to pause and actually see, Hitesh, I'll kind of open the Q&A myself and ask you, if you were giving advice, if you were talking to an innovation leader at an in-house law department, and they said, we too want to build, we too want to kind of create our own solutions to our very specific problems, what would you tell them?
Sure. So I think that to start, you definitely need a critical mass of people who are able to sort of dive in really deeply, both from a technical perspective, but also just from a usability perspective, because generative AI is unlike other technological shifts in that you get a probability distribution out. And so that sort of that leads to a lot of downstream effects. Unlike traditional software, where if there's a bug, you go in and fix it. Generative AI, the bugs are features, many cases. So your mindset kind of has to shift. It's very easy to build a POC. You can build a POC an hour a day. It's very straightforward. But taking these things to production with reliable performance, with explainability, with auditability, is really a long tail problem. It takes a lot of work. And you kind of have to design very robust evaluations for each stage of the pipeline. And so I think there are two ways you can approach it. You can either commit to sort of deploying the right talent and empower them to go really deep, and understand that it's going to be a journey. Or you can partner with somebody that's able to sort of provide that expertise to your teams in order to actually help you adopt these tools and build them. I think, again, we touched on the chatbot aspect previously, but you can spin up a chatbot very easily, but a chatbot isn't really going to solve a lot of business problems realistically. I think you need to do work to make this capability actually work for you. And the answer will depend on your specific circumstances, how willing you are as an organization to invest in R&D, versus whether you'd like to partner with somebody that can sort of provide that insight to help you sort of deliver those outcomes.
Yeah, I think one of the things that has really been striking throughout this process to me is just how frequently the solution needs to evolve and change as a result of the underlying technology. Like, do you have, and this is something too that has come out in conversation with our participants in the Sense Collective. is there an example that you would give around where, something you built is then needs to be rebuilt or needs to be refined or re-architected just as a result of the pace of change?
Yeah, there are a number of vectors that can cause those changes, from a new model dropping to a new technique being sort of put out in the form of a research paper that leads to wildly better outcomes. And this happens almost every day. It's not even like a monthly problem at this point. But I think a concrete example is with the O1 models releasing. Prompting them is a completely different paradigm versus GPT-4o. And I think, just another sort of side note on that, I think you could easily spend 5-10 years innovating on top of GPT-4o and produce a lot of very, very valuable solutions. And I think that might be why
And
the
Hitesh,
paradigm shift that.
just so we may have a variety of audience members, give us like a few minutes on the difference
Sure,
between 4 and O1.
sure. So I think the biggest difference between 4o and O1 is that the O1 models are essentially designed to think before responding. And again, if we go back to what Jess was saying about system one, system two, I think you can think of GPT-4o and the GPT-4 class of models generally as system one thinkers, and think of O1 more as a system two thinker, where it will take, a certain amount of time to reason over the question that you asked, the task that you asked it to do before responding. Um, and one of the sort of immediate downstream impacts of that is that you kind of have to prompt it a little bit differently. All of the tricks and techniques that those of us who've been building against this capability, or even being, even power users, might sort of explore prompting techniques like chain of thought, things like that. They don't really, they aren't required with O1, because the ability for it to think about the answer is kind of built in. So you almost have to treat it as something that you delegate to, and that's a paradigm shift. Every time a new model drops, you have to run your evals again, because you might have to change your prompt slightly, you might have to tune your parameters slightly just to make it work as well as the previous model was, or even better. But with O1, it's a different dynamic altogether, because you have to account for a reasoning chain that is indeterminate, that can have a lot of impacts from both a prompting perspective, but also a system design perspective. I think that's an easy example.
Yeah. And
I
I
would
think
cite.
something you said there too, it really resonates with how I've been talking, like trying to help our clients understand how to use these technologies, what to ask for in the moment. You said you really need to think about it as delegating. And that is very similar to some of our conversations. So, we had a client recently who had an incident where they had a potential data breach, and they needed quickly to understand what was in the contracts of the clients that had affected data. And so as we were sort of working with them to outline what the objective for Factor was going to be, and what the objective for their, ultimate information gathering was, they were very retrieval oriented in what they were asking for. So it was, I want the confidentiality clause. I want the total value of the contract. I want whatever. And I was like, but that's not what you need to understand. Like, if you were handing this to a person, what would you ask them about this body of contracts? You would say, in the event of a breach of confidentiality, what is my notification timeline? And if I do not meet my notification timeline, what are the penalties to me? Like, you would ask them for a summarization, for a reasoned articulation of your liability and risk vis-a-vis that contract, so as to advance your decision making. And thus, what should I do? Which contract should I prioritize? So really pushing them to think about what they were asking Mosaic for was much like, don't think of this as a computer, think of this as a person that you want outcomes from, because that is what it is capable of when scaffolded by expert Factor lawyers that can look at the output, guide it, refine the prompting. So really sort of managing that use case based on a redefined expectation of technology was my experience of working with them there. And it's been similar. We've used this extensively, like I said, across different large-scale analysis scenarios, as well as we are starting to even more deploy Negotiator into ongoing live reviews where, we're seeing folks initially think about replacing one aspect, so like comparing the playbook to the redlined contract. We're going to take the labor out of somebody switching back and forth. Great. But actually, where I'm more interested in changing the paradigm and processes where we have a client who is asking our senior lawyers to summarize, explain, and justify every ultimate departure from a playbook position. And not only can the tool spot those things, provide that summary, provide that rationale, but it just saves them a ton of time in terms of writing that, gathering the citations, pointing to past precedent, all of these time-consuming activities that, it's not the most basic work. It's the more complex work, the work where we are relying on someone with the most experience and subject matter knowledge to actually apply their brain to. There's so much that they can lean on if they thought of this as an assistant, another coworker, someone to delegate to.
No, absolutely, Jess. And, you and I talk about this stuff every day, every other week. But, what was it like for you to sort of immediately see the distinction between like the old way of doing things and the new way of doing things? Because I don't think we got to this, but Mosaic is an incredibly open-ended reasoning engine. So you can do things that you might not intuitively assume you can do with it. So if you ask it to pull out something simple like say the effective date, you can also just ask it to format the date in a certain format. It'll do it. If you want it to summarize a clause, it will summarize a clause. If you want it to extract the clause verbatim, it can do that as well. And all of this in addition to being able to just get you to the answer, which has been the massive unlock for us. And so, you spoke a little bit about how we've been using it, but I wonder if you want to share a little bit about how conversations with our clients have gone when we've said, well, we could use the legacy technology that'll pull out the clauses, but that's not really what you want. And that's a lot of effort for something that you ultimately will have to spend a lot of time analyzing, interpreting. So it would be great to hear about some of those conversations and how they go.
Yeah, I think for me, it has been really unpacking the legal work that the team, even beyond our team, the client team plans to do, and sort of understanding all of that, all of those task blocks in the process. So for example, we were speaking to a group of stakeholders at a variety of global banks, and we were talking to them about the process that they go through now to understand risk positions presented across a single client in different types of agreements and different lines of business within the bank. So it might be credit agreements, it might be ISDA agreements, there's different contracts in place that in aggregate summarize all of the different risk positions and requirements. And so in hearing them talk about having different groups of people extract all of the data, centralize it, then having a group of individuals that may or may not look at the data and may or may not draw conclusions, to be able to say, well, what if you could just look at all of the contracts for this counterparty across every line of business and say, what is the aggregate risk with respect to, a term like cross default or something like that. So really short-circuiting the substantive asks to start with the end product and say, what are you ultimately going to do with that? And we don't have to sort of eliminate pieces of the labor along the way. In many instances, we can jump straight to the answer. So whatever is the ultimate outcome, it's really being willing to disassemble the entire old way of working and start from the most critical point and say, how do these technologies help us work differently, think differently, inject expertise at different points in the process to speed us to insight and information. I want to make sure that if the audience, I see one cheeky question directed towards Hitesh about just how smart he is. But no, and an honest question folded in there about how we should train the minds of users. So this is, we've touched a little bit about on this. If anybody else wants to ask questions, please put them in. Ashley, if you want to go to the next slide. Oh, yeah. So we at Factor think a lot about how to light people up with respect to just what is possible to change their thinking, to ask for more. And one of the ways that we have done this, that everyone is, very welcome. We are opening up a new cohort, is our co-learning community. I've mentioned it several times, but just in case anybody does not know, the Sense Collective is a Factor facilitated year-long experience where we are actually learning, building, bringing together a variety of different legal departments with different perspectives on different elements of this problem. But really at the heart of it is leading around GenAI, how to upskill, how to make your people smarter. We have also introduced recently what we are calling SenseMaker Academy, which is a more structured upskilling training program aimed at in-house legal departments, where we bring some of this community aspect, but do very focused workshops and different curriculum blocks that are structured around whatever the environment you are working in, whatever the tools that you're relying in. So for us, it's really helping people understand what this technology unlocks, and then deal with the variety of human emotions that that unleashes, as well as the technical learning required. Hitesh, do you want to give, you've been very involved in the Sense Collective, and I think a lot of what I've heard you talk about today with respect to our journey, this is some insights that you have brought to the participants in the Sense Collective in the co-development work stream in particular, where people bring different use cases and they attempt to build and create working prototypes across legal departments. So bringing a lot of different participants who might not normally work together against the same problem. How have you guys been coaching and supporting that work, Hitesh?
Sure. So the team and I have had a role to play around sort of a lot of these workshops that we run as part of the co-develop process, as well as providing coaching on, best practices around prompting, which is a necessary skill still. Even though the direction of travel suggests that things are changing and the paradigm might be changing, you still have to ultimately prompt these things in one way or the other. So we've been helping out with that. And then obviously a lot of the research insights we provide, help us sort of articulate how we're thinking about the capability as well. For instance, when O1 launched, again, I keep coming back to O1 because I genuinely feel like a lot of folks are sleeping on how massive a capability advance that is. But for us to sort of get access to O1, quickly be able to evaluate what it can do, run all of our sort of suite of evaluations, and be able to surface that insight and say, hey, you have to prompt this differently. It feels different. Like it genuinely feels different. It's a completely different beast. You have to interact with it very differently. Obviously, that gets translated into a lot of the insights that we're sharing as part of the Sense Collective. That's a small example, but again, even at a more deeper technical level, some of the work we've done optimizing search and retrieval and re-ranking, all of that has utility against a lot of the more complex use cases that we're seeing out there. So, yeah.
Awesome. Okay, I do not see any more questions, Ashley. If anybody wants to drop in to the Q&A, but otherwise, really appreciated everyone that joined today, and appreciate you, Hitesh, and all that you've done to make it possible for us at Factor to really be changing the future of legal work. I know that our movie time moved really fast. So if you are interested and on the line and want to spend some more time looking slowly at some of our fast and slow thinking, we are happy to have a follow-up conversation. So please reach out. You can reach out to Factor generally, or me, jessica.block@factor.law, and I'm happy to do a more detailed walkthrough. We've been doing this with a lot of our current clients and a lot of our Sense Collective members, and that's been great feedback cycle for us and has been really exciting to sort of start to see some of this just get into the hands of our team members and into delivering the work that we are entrusted with. So happy to have been with you all, and please don't hesitate to reach out.
Thanks, Jess. Thanks, Hitesh.
All right. Bye, guys. Thank you.